All right, so we are live and we're going to be talking about one of the best ways to grow your business on Amazon and beyond by taking your products and offering them to people in other parts of the world who could buy your product right now, but they can't because it's not available for sale there. And so who's the person that can fix it? Well, you are, but I'm also here with someone who can help you fix that problem to get your product seen by customers all around the world. So I'm super excited to be joined by Jacob McQuoid from Avask Accounting, the company that's been doing my compliance stuff, which is sometimes not the most exciting topic in the world until it is. But it's one of those topics you don't want it to be an issue. So I'm excited that we're here with Jacob. So Jacob, thank you for joining us here at the Brand Mastery Summit.
Thank you very much for having me, Kevin. It's good to be here.
Yes, it's good to see you. So real quick, folks, if you don't mind, just make sure you can hear me. If you don't mind clicking the little thumbs up icon saying you can hear me in the comments, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, that's always helpful. Because we're going to be talking about international expansion and how you can take your business to other countries and really level things up for yourself. So real quick, Jacob, tell us a little bit about yourself and Avask Accounting. Who are you?
Yeah, so a little bit about myself first. So I'm the head of business development here at Avask. So I've been with the business for the past 5 years. A lot of my role with clients from all around the world, people selling online, people selling on Amazon, helping them go into new markets. So, you know, covering certain parts of what you need to go into new markets. So you see, that's kind of leads into like what Avask do. You know, we're trying to streamline cross-border sales essentially, so offering solutions to help you sell cross-border. So like if you're based in the US looking to expand into Europe, there's certain things that you need to do to be able to do that. It's not as easy as just launching. So, you know, we fit in to help you with different regulations, whether that's taxes, environmental regulations, and much more. But yeah, essentially kind of to boil it down, helping you go into different markets and dealing with the stuff you probably don't want to have to deal with.
Right, exactly. Nobody wants to have to deal with foreign governments and whatnot. Yeah. So, all right. So on that note, Leo did say he can hear us. Pro SMF gave us the thumbs up, and Susan R says audio is good. So thank you all for making me feel a little bit better, because maybe it's user error, but I feel like there's always something goes slightly wrong before we go on. Like Hero's fiddling before we got started. Hero's fiddling with wrong microphone being connected and switching to a different camera. So there's always something going on. Chad Drew, who looks a lot like Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber, oddly enough.
He does. Very similar.
Very similar. So another shrimp on the Barbie. That's, I think, one of the best comedies of all time.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'll have to watch that again. Actually, it's been a few years since I've watched that film.
Yes, it's definitely been a few years for me as well. I gotta watch that. That is a classic. So anyway, so in the movie, here we got another line from that exact scene in the picture. Good day, mate. When the woman says she's from Austria. And he gave a Australian accent and he starts using Australian terms. So
I remember that. Is he in the limo? Is he in the
Yes, he was in the limo. He goes to like the back of the limo and rolls down the window. Yes, that was comedy gold. But so anyway, she was from Austria, the woman he was talking to, and he was using Australia. So sometimes people do, this is probably a good segue that we didn't even plan, get the concepts between different countries being, you know, Austria and Australia are completely different sides of the world, different cultures, different languages, different a lot of things. So, and there's also different rules, right? So just because we do things one way in the US doesn't necessarily mean that's the way it's done in the UK. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think very, very fair. Yes. You know, very different, like in terms of regulation, kind of what is needed, and actually the way things work. So I think it's a pretty fair comment. And then you look at other places in the world as well; it's kind of all translate. So you know, why it's key to have these conversations, especially for people like thinking about it. to have the relevant information so they can make, an informed decision of whether, okay, that market is going to be right for me, or maybe that's too wet for me at this point in time. It's not quite the right point for my business.
Right, exactly. Because at the end of the day, everyone would like to do everything. And one of the challenges is when you come out of a summit like the Brand Mastery Summit with over 20 speakers, your colleague Laura West was one of the speakers as well. And people come out and they've got like just a list that they've written down of all these things they want to do. And you can do anything, but you can't necessarily do everything. So can you give us maybe what would be the pros and cons of when someone should and should not consider expanding to international markets?
Yeah. So obviously everyone, like as you said, everyone wants to expand everywhere at once, and ideally it would be easy and you wouldn't have to do too much, but it's not the reality. It's very product dependent because different products have different regulations. So it obviously depends on what point you're at in the business. So you need to make sure, like, if you're gonna do it, then you do it correctly, because there's no point in launching when you're not going to put full effort into it. Like, there does need to be effort. But there's lots of businesses out there that can really easily translate what they're already doing into another market. Like here in Europe, like especially for the US market, yes, things are different, but it's not like too overly complicated. Some people might not think that. They might hear like all these different phases and all these different types of regulation, but the reality is when you actually look into kind of what you need to do and talk to the people that can provide that, it's fairly straightforward. And also, lots of products, they translate quite well into the European market. So like if you're based in the US, you're based in Canada, we see loads and loads of success for clients that are just looking to expand. And I've been to the US many times and talked to sellers, and lots of people think, oh no, Europe, way too complicated. But the reality is, like, we see people, making 50% extra revenue, 60, 70% extra revenue. And, across a big business and even a small business, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things to keep in mind is, yes, you have to learn a little bit about some of the compliance stuff, which we'll get into here in just a moment. But if you were to compare, like, let's say you say, I want to figure out Shopify. I know very few people who do Amazon and their own stores, whether they're hosted on Shopify or not. I know very few people who do both exceptionally well. Usually they do one pretty well and the other one is just kind of a side venture. And it's amazing. There's Amazon sellers would think, well, everyone knows Amazon well, but they don't know Shopify. And then I know people who are Shopify sellers are like, I can never quite get Amazon, because it's such a different beast. Whereas at least with international, grossly oversimplifying it here, but I have found, not getting into the compliance part, but at least mechanically on Amazon, the money symbol is different.
Yeah, definitely. Like the Build International Listings tool, like you're not, like, if you've already got an established business in the US, or even not even necessarily the US, another market, like for Amazon purposes, if you're selling on Amazon, just kind of getting that over to another market. Yes, there's like things you can do to optimize localization, etc., but you're not starting from scratch, really. Yeah,
exactly. So on that, before we get into actually a couple other notes on that. So PP, who's Periash, I think I pronounced your name correctly. If I did not, I apologize, says hellos. Olga from not Minnesota, but Miami, says, hello, guys. So good to see you both there. So yeah, when you're looking to expand internationally, mechanically it's the same. One thing that's even nice is this wasn't always the same. You used to have to but you'd have to be in Seller Central US, switch to Seller Central UK, and then you could go into the ads platform for each country. Like, you'd have to be Seller Central. Let's say you're an ads manager for the US, you switch back to Seller Central and then switch Seller Central UK and then go into ads platform UK. They've now made it within the ads platform. Even if it's in a different region, you can switch to the other country more easily. So Amazon's always looking to make that easy. Yeah. And it feels like they're constantly trying to figure out how to expand internationally. And, for some of us, we're getting emails from Amazon about, hey, go to Turkey, go to Saudi Arabia, go to whatever the new one is. And so the challenge is some are more worthwhile than others. So I'm sure it's like Animal Farm. All marketplaces are equal, but just some are more equal than others. So using the George Orwell expression. So what would be the more equal marketplaces?
Yeah. So if we're looking at Europe, like realistically, Europe's like if you're just selling in the US, Europe is going to be the next market. Like starting with UK and Germany as the largest, but like Europe, you can kind of put into one to an extent because you can store goods in one location and sell cross border to other locations. Now that comes with like pros and cons. Like pros would be less tax compliance, less regulation because you're not holding stock in certain countries. The cons is then having products further away from the customer, potentially not having prime eligibility. So like Europe, I would say, is definitely kind of the next stage. Then you've got like the other markets like Turkey, like Australia, the UAE, etc., which realistically are much smaller, like population wise, especially like the Australia, the UAE, they've got a small population, and Amazon is fairly new into those markets, so it's probably going to take a bit of a while to build up. So it depends. Like I generally see people probably like the larger companies looking into those markets, and it might not even be necessarily to make money at the start. It might just be to kind of solidify themselves because they expect the growth of Amazon to kind of really spike over the next few years. And then you also see small businesses that might have a product that is very relevant to that market. But generally the kind of the 90%, 95% after the US as the main market will look at Europe. And UK and Germany are really the two they come for because they are the largest by quite a way.
Yeah, exactly. Because Germany, big economy, lots of people. So Germany tends to make sense within European Union, which we'll explain the difference here in a minute. But then you have the UK, which is not in the European Union. People may remember the term Brexit. So they Brexited the European Union, which we can get into all that here in just a second. So we'll get into some of the specifics of why you would want to go into, let's say, the UK, which for a lot of folks would be the simplest one because you don't even have to translate your listings, other than the fact that maybe things might be spelled a little differently or they might use words differently. But real quick, John Aspinall says, howdy. John is one of our co-hosts for this event. So howdy to you, John. Olga has some questions, which, guys, anyone watching this, feel free to drop questions into the chat at any time, whether you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. Just drop it in and we'll get to those. So real quick, Olga asks this one question here. I have very good shipping options internationally and very interested in expanding internationally. So I'm assuming she has the ability to ship elsewhere and she's just trying to figure out what to do. So I think that's probably more of a comment than a question. But this might also be somewhat of a question buried in a comment. I get email from Amazon all the time, but I don't think it's profitable. And I think she's probably referring to when we were talking about like some of the newer marketplaces. So you had mentioned that some of these newer marketplaces, bigger companies might go there just because they want to get a foothold there.
Yeah.
One thing I have had one person say to me, and who's very resolute in this, that like if I go to Saudi Arabia, I looked and I swear I can dominate page one. The problem is some of these newer marketplaces dominating page one might be one sale per month. Yeah. Whereas in the UK, it's roughly 20% of the population of the US. So theoretically, you should at least get 20% of your US sales for the same products. And Olga mentioned here, for example, Australia and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is definitely one that I think eventually will probably do well. But if you're deciding, do I go into the UK with the limited time resources and inventory and whatnot that I have, or do I go into Saudi Arabia? I think UK would be the definite way to go. Australia, my experience, is, let's say you might have, the US is always the biggest marketplace, UK, Canada. I've seen it different for different people, which one is higher. And then you might say whichever one is lower of the two, maybe 10 or 20% of your sales between Canada and UK, which whenever is lower, is probably what your sales would be in Australia, even though Australia is about half the population of Canada.
Yeah, I think I went to a Amazon event recently where they're talking about Australia. They did say it was, the third largest growing market that they have. So in terms of e-commerce, so growing, but that's just a small market getting slightly bigger. I do think eventually they are investing a lot of money in it, but as a country, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's so large and got such a small population considering how large it is. I know they've invested quite a lot over the last, few years, put more fulfillment centers, able to offer quicker delivery. So you never know, it might grow quite a bit, but I do think at the moment, it is quite small. Specific products we do see doing quite well, but not like the UK and not like the US.
Yeah, exactly. And the challenge with a country like Australia is, and no disrespect to, I know there's a lot of amazing sellers who are Australian, so they're probably all sleeping right now while we're having this because they're on the opposite time zone as us. But if you're watching this and you're from Australia and the replay, just know we respect Australia, but just as a country, it's a harder one to get traction on. It's better than some of the other marketplaces, which were even slower. But I would say you could have eventually sell in Australia. I sell in Australia, but I wouldn't say Australia would be at the expense of UK or Canada or potentially Germany if it made sense for your products. Now, Olga asked this question here: how can we be successful in the UK? They have their own sellers with cheaper shipping options. Which I guess if we're talking about FBA, let's just make the distinction. So let's take a step back. If somebody wants to do FBA in the UK as opposed to shipping it from, let's say, Miami as FBM, what would they need to do to be able to ship FBA products from either China into the UK or from the US into the UK, like just to get it across the border? What do they have to do?
Yeah, so I mean, like, first of all, I think everyone, if you've sent into FBA, but if not, it's worth noting. Obviously, you create shipments on Amazon, get your FBA labels, everything you need for Amazon, and then obviously find someone who can do the inbound for you, whether that's small parcel delivery or LTL deliveries, whatever it is. But in terms of like the actual like regulation side of things, everyone's going to need a VAT number. So that's the first thing they'll need. So that's
What is a VAT number?
So it's a value-added tax number. So kind of to directly compare it against sales tax in the US, and sales tax is added on at checkout. So you see the product for $10, and then when you go to checkout, it's $11 as an example. Whereas the price that's displayed on Amazon in the UK and across any platform is VAT inclusive. So that in the UK is 20%, but that will be included in the price. It doesn't go to checkout and then add tax on. To keep it simple, if you had your net price, so the price you think you're going to sell your product for, not considering VAT, you would add 20% on, so make that £12, and that would be the price that you list on Amazon. And then the £2 of that is the VAT element. And then you would have to pay that to the tax office here in the UK for any sales that you make. So everyone has to be registered. You have to declare quarterly a VAT return to essentially tell the authorities how much you're paying and pay any liabilities. So that's something that you'll need. You also need what's called an EORI number. So it's essentially like an extension of your VAT number now. So you have your VAT number, and then it's got 3 zeros on the end, and it's used for importing your products. So whenever you want to bring products into the UK, you want to bring bulk stock, you'll need an EORI number in order to import. It's something that your shipping agent, your customs broker would put on the import declaration. So that's one thing you need, the VAT number. You may need a responsible person. So as you're based elsewhere in the world, you might need someone to be kind of responsible for the product, so like product compliance. This is like, there's levels to it, because selling a box of tissues versus selling a consumable, like regulation-wise, is a lot different. So you need to ensure, like, whatever you're selling, you are up to date with the regulation. You've adhered to all the regulations, because the government and trading standards, eventually, if you're not adhering to the regulation, they will find out and your products will be suspended. And whether you actually even be able to start selling your products, probably not.
Well, okay, hold on. Let's just make sure everyone understands. So, like, you have to have a responsible person. So, if someone has a cousin that's in Ireland or Wales or somewhere, can they have that person vouch for them as
no?
being responsible?
So you get companies that offer this service. It's something we have partners that offer it. But essentially, it would be called responsible person. I know Amazon do have a service for it as well, but someone located here, kind of within the UK, inside this jurisdiction. And then when I say there's different levels to it, so they might have to make sure you've got all the paperwork you need. So whether that's CE markings or CTA markings for electrical products or whatever it might be, they need to have the paperwork ensuring that what you're selling is what you're selling, and you've adhered to all the necessary regulations depending on the product and the category. And if, say, trading standards ever wanted to visit to kind of check paperwork, potentially actually check samples, that's not always required, but I know sometimes it can be required. To essentially make sure what you're listing online, what you're actually selling is kind of what you say it is, and it's also following the relevant regulations.
Got it. So it's somebody who's kind of who is like your direct contact. So in the US, we have a term called registered agent, who might be someone who maybe receives mail or correspondence for your company, which doesn't necessarily have to be someone in your company. So basically, you're creating to use a US equivalent of a registered agent, is a responsible person who could be
I guess
a company.
That could translate to an extent. So essentially, there's liability issues, like with selling here and selling a product here. So like anyone selling internationally and in lots of countries, like you've got to make sure that essentially all governments and trading standards essentially need to make sure kind of there is someone to kind of ensure liability is covered, or kind of ensuring that products are what they say they are. Like if you're talking like probably 5 years ago, 4 years ago, it was much less regulated e-commerce. So you had lots of people selling from all over the world that really weren't keeping up with regulation, and governments couldn't keep up with it either. So over the last few years, there's been lots more brought in to ensure people are doing what they need to be doing. So there's many different levels to that, as I said, because it depends on the actual product. But even like VAT, they're a lot stricter on VAT. When I first started in the business, and I was speaking to sellers from all over the world, lots of them hadn't been declaring any VAT, either because they'd been advised to expand to a new market and they hadn't been told about any VAT requirements, but it's also because marketplaces weren't jointly and severally liable. So now that it's a lot more regulated, marketplaces are kind of put in front of that and made to enforce the rules in a lot of cases, which is great, because it makes an equal playing field. It means that no one can come in from other places and not declare VAT, not kind of do what they shouldn't be doing, not kind of have the products how they should be. Much more even playing field, which means more red tape, really. But I always see it as a good thing, because, like, again, go back to when I started, I would talk to lots of businesses that were getting undercut by other businesses because they weren't declaring VAT. So that that's illegal. They were doing it completely incorrectly, but they were getting away with it for a long time, which you can't anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So and part of it too is, if you're on a marketplace like Amazon, similar to the US, but not quite the same, you have it's not marketplace facilitator. It's online marketplace is the term, if I remember correctly.
So like an OMP is what you call it, online
OMP, yes.
Yeah, it is responsible for collection and remittance of tax in certain cases. So referencing what I was talking about earlier in my example of the £10 plus you add the 20%, and then it gives you £12, and out of that £12 you pay the government. For non-established companies, so what I mean by that is, so as an example, a US business, they're not established here in the UK or the EU. Amazon or online marketplaces, OMPs, are responsible for doing the deduction of the VAT. So they would take that £2 element, not give it to you, and they would pay it to the government directly on your behalf. Now that's led to a misconception of, okay, well, I don't actually need to do anything. You still need to register for the relevant VAT numbers wherever you're storing products, and you have to declare to the tax office the amount you're selling. So when we do a VAT return for a client who's based in the US, selling in the UK, we're still putting in the VAT return all the details, all the data, and then showcasing that there was, say, £50,000 worth of sales in a quarter. But the actual VAT to declare on that is £0 because it's all through an OMP. So very similar to the marketplace facilitator law that you guys have. It's kind of, works in a very similar way. But it's just, you still need to make sure that you've incorporated the VAT into the price, because they're not going to be adding anything on, and they are going to be taking it away. So if you hadn't factored that in, then you're suddenly losing a lot of margin.
Yeah, and just so everyone understands, like, that's 20% VAT. Now, it's kind of convoluted because, as Jacob explained, like, if something's offered for £12, it's really £10 is the kind of net price. There's a 20% VAT of, in that case, £2, and then you add that together, it's £12, and that's what the customer sees, is £12. Whereas here in the US, you advertise it for $10, and depending on where they live and what their tax rate is, then that's added on at checkout. And that's just, we kind of expect it. But it's kind of like, I use this example sometimes, like if I went to a football stadium and, somebody walking up and down selling beer, and let's say it's $12, and I hand them a 20, they don't add on the sales tax. They just give me $8 back. Now, I still paid tax, but what they do is they back it out. So they're doing a reverse number instead of adding it on. So that's kind of more like the way it is in Europe. So anyone that's familiar, if you've ever been somewhere where it's like sales tax is included, it's the value added tax is a sales tax and it is included. Now, value added tax, help folks understand the value added part and how that's different from US, where it's just basically sales tax is charged at the end by the end consumer at the final stage of value.
So we have input and output tax. So an output, the easiest way to describe it is like an output would be like on the sale. So when you make a sale, like we've discussed with the £12 scenario, that £2 is the output. So that is something that is payable. But within like the chain of transactions before that, because it's not always just I have a product and I've sold it to a customer. There might be a lot more that goes into that. So it might be I purchase some raw materials from a supplier here. They'll have to charge me VAT. And then I put that through as an input, so I'm reclaiming it. And it's like through every chain of the transaction until you finally get to the end part, which is then the output. So like, you may have lots of, so say for example, I'm bringing something in from China. So I import it from China directly to my warehouse here in the UK. I pay import VAT, which is an input. As a VAT registered business, I can reclaim that. I then sell that as those goods to a distributor here in the UK, as an example. I then have to charge them VAT. I pay that and they reclaim it, and then they sell it to, say, an end consumer, and then they pay that last final bit of VAT. So, there's lots of kind of moving it along the chain, essentially, lots of kind of paying and reclaiming. It's similar in quite a lot of countries, like Europe, it all works that way. Australia, there's many countries that work off that model. With inputs and outputs. It's the same as if we were to, if I was to potentially use a service here in the UK, or to, go to the shop and as a business and purchase some stuff like some stationary equipment I might need for the office. That would all have VAT in it, and then you would go and reclaim that VAT on your quarterly VAT returns.
Got it. So basically so you have VAT you collected from customers. You subtract it out from VAT you paid, which would be a credit, and then you pay the difference.
Yeah, as long as you're eligible for all of those credits. I know that's kind of the word you guys use.
The little asterisk there.
Yeah. As long as kind of you're registered, you're relevant. But so like we So that just kind of taking a very simple case of a US business sending products to the UK. They've got the import VAT, which is payable, and then the sales VAT. That's kind of, most of the time what we see, because it's not often you're going to have suppliers in the UK and you're purchasing from suppliers, usually bringing it from abroad. So, if it's a simple transaction, I'm just selling on Amazon, import it, pay import VAT. That's an input. I can reclaim that. And then the output VAT is on the sales. Now, since Brexit and since the changes with online marketplaces deducting the VAT and then paying it, I know, Kevin, you know about the scenarios, but prior to all the changes, the inputs would just be offset against the outputs. So if you paid £1,000 when goods came in and you owed £2,000 on the sales that you made, then you would just pay an additional £1,000 because it's minus stuff. But because Amazon are now collecting and remitting it, you've suddenly then got £1,000, which you can't offset against any liability because there might not actually be any liability.
Right, because the £2,000 that you gave in your example before is already taken care of by Amazon.
Yeah, which it never used to be. So this is, it's not so recent now. But if you were selling a few years ago, maybe you had another brand you were selling, or another company that you're part of that you're selling for. The rules have changed and the way it happens has changed. So now, you might have you might be in a place where you actually have paid £1,000 and you have to get that back, and that requires actually the government physically paying you back, which now is good because you can do direct bank transfers if you provide the bank details, or the second option is checks, which I know you've had to go through that headache, haven't you, Kevin?
Yes, yeah. I mean, like literally, I think what is it? The post office is in Malta or something like that in the UK, and it comes. I think like they might have a kayak or a rowboat to go across the Atlantic Ocean, and then eventually gets to the US and it gets to you. And sometimes the date on like the letter and the check could be like 3 months earlier. And then you go to your bank and maybe someone has experience with foreign currencies. Maybe they're not. Sometimes they look at it and they're like, who's this customs Her Majesty person? Which is the IRS of the UK, and then they have to figure out like the conversion and all that. It's just it's a hassle, and it doesn't work with the app on your phone to deposit checks.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Luckily, they did introduce a new system. I always call it Scheme, but I know
yes, yeah, yeah. This is always the good one. Yes, Schemes.
Yeah. So the PVA system, I'll call it system because I think it translates a little bit better. But essentially, any of the imports, so like when we're talking about that, getting the credit back, there's a way that instead of actually paying it when it comes in, you can defer it onto the VAT return, and then they allow you to do it as a plus and a minus. When I say you, I mean us. So essentially, if there was that £1,000 that you had to pay, it still gets listed on the import declaration when the goods are coming in, but it gets listed as deferred, essentially. And then when we go to submit a VAT return, we do a plus and a minus, and then it nets out as zero. And then essentially you don't have to pay it. So you don't have to go through that headache of, someone getting the letter.
Paying it out and then getting it paid back months later.
Yeah. So that's good. And they're doing similar things across multiple countries in Europe. So we've seen different systems implemented over the last couple of years to help with that, because there was a lot of cases, and in reality, the way I see it is it's just an admin burden for tax offices. People are going, there's a lot of people's time spent processing and processing for not really much gain, I would say. If it's just, £1,000 paid, £1,000 refunded, it's, probably thinking, what is the point? In a lot of cases, which is fair enough. So they've introduced systems for registered businesses in lots of countries where we can do paperwork transactions. So essentially for you as a business, you wouldn't actually be seeing that. As long as we've got the paperwork, we've got the information, when we do the VAT return, plus and a minus, nets out a zero, cash flow is much better for you.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not basically giving a no interest loan to the government of the UK.
Exactly.
So exactly. All right. So we've got some questions that have come in here. I'm interested in Australia because it's opposite season and I have deep inventory in summer inventory, shorts and cover-ups. So she has a seasonal business, which sounds like the season for the most part. Now in Miami, that's year-round, but for the rest of the U.S., it's not so year-round. So Australia might be, but the thing to keep in mind is, there's more people that live in Florida than live in Australia. I think. I'm almost positive. Somebody can hold me to that, but I believe it's like a few million more people live in Florida than live in Australia.
Wouldn't be surprised.
There's only, what's that?
I said I wouldn't be surprised. I think it's about somewhere between 25 and 30 million for Australia. I don't know Florida, but that's what it is for Australia. So I wouldn't be surprised if Florida has more.
Well, let's look it up here real quick. So Australia population. Oh, it's 25 million. Okay, so I'm probably wrong. So Texas population, 29 million. So Texas is bigger. So what about Florida? 21.78. So they're comparable. So Australia and Florida are comparable. So about as much as Texas is bigger than Australia, Australia is bigger than Florida, but it's not by that much. So you wouldn't want to go into Texas and sell there if they just weren't as used to buying on Amazon and whatnot. And Australia also is about the size land-wise of the US. So people are a lot more spread out. Well, they're in pockets, which east and west, and then there's not much in the middle. So it makes logistics a little tougher there too, which I think is one of the reasons. So if you're thinking about, and I've had this conversation with so many people over the years that like, I want to go to Australia because I have a summer product or I have a winter product or whatever it is, and they have the opposite season, so they think it's going to offset. Not enough to be worth your time, in my experience, compared to first going into Europe or Canada or somewhere else that's more established.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on Australia?
Yeah, I'd say I do agree. Like depending on where the business is, like if you've maximized Florida as an example, or the US, and you're just looking for the next route, then like it could be a consideration. Having seasonal products over there is definitely good, but it also means it's a very hot country. There is already probably quite a lot of competition in that particular category. True. The good thing about Australia is they do actually offer foreign companies a registration threshold before kind of any.
That's true. Yep.
According to any
they don't even want to talk to you.
Yeah, yeah. So with Australia, in terms of like tax registrations, they've got something similar, a similar system to us. The only difference is, when I say us, I'm talking about us in the UK and in Europe, is they don't, as soon as you start storing products there, it's not automatically you have to register and start declaring the GST, goods and services tax, exactly the same as VAT, basically, just a different name. You don't have to start declaring it on your sales until you breach 75,000 of annual turnover, Australian dollars. So it's probably about $50,000 or so, there or thereabouts. Double check that because I haven't looked at the exchange rates in a while. But essentially, it's kind of a place where you could try, pretty low risk in terms of what you actually commit to. But if it goes wrong, then logistically, you've then suddenly got loads of stock there. And if you can't sell it, you're going to end up, selling it really, really cheap or having to do something else, trying to get it out of Australia. It might cost a lot. So I think, it's very dependent on where your business is, very dependent on kind of whether the market's there on the product. But yeah, it's
yeah. And if you are going to try it, start small. Like, don't say, I do a container at a time in the US, so I'm going to do a container for Australia. I would send in a case.
Yeah, and you're best off like paying more for the case and thinking, even if I sold it at full price, I'm going to lose money. But you're doing it for the purpose of research into, okay, right, actually, am I going to send, a whole container's worth? Yes, no, and then you can figure it out that way. But I'd say that's definitely a good idea. Just small case, especially with those products, shorts, etc., tops. You can probably fit quite a lot into, a couple of cases. Just see what it's like.
Yep.
You know, obviously you'll have to pay a subscription charge on Amazon, but one or 2 months to test it, it's probably going to be a low investment that you have to make. You're probably not going to make too much money to start off with, but at least you can get an idea for the market and think, actually, yeah, I'm going to put more thought into that and more investment.
I would agree. It's definitely worth trying out. But if you've already exhausted other resources of other Amazon marketplaces with higher potential. All right. So Faisal asks, just logged in, so not sure if this question was already answered. This was actually asked a few minutes ago. When we want to sell, say, from UK inventory to UAE customers, should we have to make a new seller account, new listing in UAE? I'm not as familiar with UAE.
So you shouldn't have to make a new account. Like, you just have to. So I mean, obviously, if people or if anyone from the UAE is to go on to .co.uk, I'm not sure if I don't think Amazon would fulfill that. I don't think they would at all. But you probably could do your own merchant fulfillment. But you're not going to get many people from the UAE going on to Amazon.co.uk and buying products. So you'd have to set up the separate account in the UAE, but you can do that all via your main account on Seller Central, from what I believe. I know you can for all the other markets, so I don't think it would be any different for the UAE. And then listing-wise, you would just use the Build International Listings tool, and you can transfer listings. You know, providing everything that you are selling or what you're looking to sell is actually allowed to be sold in those markets. You know, different markets have different restrictions. But yeah, for the most part, you should just be able to list in the UAE using your existing listings, but transferring them over via Amazon's tools and putting the account on for the UAE. Otherwise, you're not going to get any visibility.
Yes, and at the end of the day, you are gonna have to create listings, whatever marketplace you're in. So Jacob's 100% right there. And whether it's going to be a different region, so it might technically, if you go to like inventory sell globally, it might be a account or whatever they call it, but it's all good. It should be the same login when you're all said and done registering there. That you have everything. So, but I'm with Jacob, 99.9% sure you can't do FBA unless Amazon has some weird program, which sometimes they come up with stuff because they're wanting it.
Yeah, they do have, like, you can send products there, but I know you're talking about sending it from the UK inventory. I mean, they have FBA centers there, but then obviously there's more to consider if you're doing that. FBM you could do. So you know you're fulfilling it, and if you're listing there, you'll be able to do it. But you know, again, it's one of those markets which is small. So you might want to do that to test it before actually committing to sending inventory. As soon as you send inventory there, you're going to have more requirements in terms of tax, etc. So yeah, you know, there's the options. I think just kind of investigate those options, see what's possible, see whether that's going to be a good market for your product, and then you might want to think about, actually, is it worth getting the products stored there? Because you know, realistically, selling on Amazon and people buying products on Amazon, they want it fairly quick. You know, market specific, but they generally want it fairly quick. So sending all the way from the UK directly to the UAE is probably not going to be the most attractive offer. But obviously there's costs that come into play when you actually send products there. So I guess you need to look into the market, say, actually, it's going to be worth it. Do I want to put the investment in? It's not like Australia where you get a threshold before you have to register. You would have to register straight away.
Yeah, exactly. So I would definitely do some due diligence as to what the compliance things are for Saudi Arabia before going there. And one thing to keep in mind too is if you're used to selling in US, UK, Canada, Australia, they're all based on English common law, like just the way things work in those countries. Saudi Arabia, I don't know enough about it, but I'm going to assume they kind of have their own way of doing things compared to the, more, what's the term, Commonwealth nations, the nations that used to be part of the UK. Or not part of the UK, but like we're territories or whatever. Yes. All right, cool. All right. Olga asks, do we calculate ourselves the price for UK, including VAT? Yes, you have to do that yourself.
Yes. So
assumed.
Yeah, so you do have to do that yourself. So you need to include the VAT. Some products, so you do get reduced rate products and zero rated products, but you need to ensure you know what rate that you're putting for the majority. So like 95% of products, probably actually higher than that, it's going to be the standard rate. So and talking about 20%, obviously that's the UK, but other countries have different percents. They're there or thereabouts, but most countries would have like, zero rated and reduced rate. On the Amazon settings in the UK, you'll have standard VAT rate. So they'll deduct standard VAT rate. If you've got products that are reduced, then you could add the reduced rate and they'll take the reduced rate. But, then that has to go through kind of more vigilant processes for approval. So you need to make sure you've got the right settings, but you need to include it, like we were talking about earlier. So if you were considering £10 as the selling price without any VAT included, you just add 20% to that £10 to make it 12, and that is your VAT inclusive price that you would list the product for on Amazon.
Yeah. All right, good. So other question from PP Periesh asks, nitty gritty apart, how would we compete with the local sellers in international locations, especially if we don't have the capability to scale or to hold big inventory?
I think there's always the potential. I mean, if you're talking about local sellers, like as a UK business, if I was to sell in the UK, I'm still most likely getting my products from Asia, from China, and I'm still negotiating the same as you would. So there's not necessarily any benefits to me, and I wouldn't really necessarily have a price advantage. If I produced products in the UK, I manufactured them myself, then yeah, maybe I'd have that advantage. But most, probably 99% of people are not manufacturing their own products. There's not many people producing products that are sold on Amazon in the UK. Most of them, as everyone knows, are coming from China. So there isn't really, a price advantage for me there, to be honest. So, I don't, that doesn't really come into consideration really. To be honest, it shouldn't be too much of a factor.
Yeah. I totally agree. And if you think about it, like one of the questions that always comes up at summits is how, or anything I go to, how do we compete with Chinese sellers? So usually people selling in the US are like, how do we compete with these people that are outside of the US? So yes, in China, they usually have, because everyone's importing from them anyway. So they have kind of the value added aspect, not value added tax, but they just have the ability of, they have margins because they're not selling, because in a lot of ways we're kind of middlemen. So because if you think of it from a grand scheme, if they're more direct to the factory, they have margin, they have more margin to play with. So, but when you're talking about whether you're in the UK, selling in the UK, or you live in the US, or you live in Australia, or you live in Pakistan, or wherever you live, you're somewhat of an equal playing field. It's just your ability to source the product, market the product, and things of that nature.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree. And, how you structure your accounts, your campaigns, everything like that is, that's really where the competition is. There's not any benefit generally to local sellers.
Yes. All right. So Olga says that's a really good point. Australia versus Florida, what we said before, when you think about the potential market size. PP says good insights. Jacob and Kevin, can you please also throw some light on the Amazon global selling platform?
I'm actually not too familiar with the Amazon global selling platform, to be honest.
Yes. So I think what it is like when you go into Seller Central, they tell you like, hey, you have X number of products that there's international demand for, or you're in, it could be, they're always adding these little widgets on the front of Seller Central, which I think are to push people internationally. Like Amazon, if you think about this, Amazon wants you to sell internationally. They go out of their way sometimes to oversimplify it, because they do want sellers to go there internationally, because it's to their benefit to have bigger catalogs and all the marketplaces they sell. So they really want you to sell there. So as far as like their platforms, always think of a step back of Amazon has goals, you have goals. Amazon pushes you towards marketplaces that are newer because they want bigger catalogs there. They already have a good sized catalog in the UK and Canada and Japan and more established marketplaces, whereas Australia's maturing, but it's still only a few years old. And then someplace like Saudi Arabia or Turkey are only a couple years old. So that's why they really wanted you to get there, because they have this chicken and egg problem.
Mm.
All right, so now let's do this. So we're getting towards the end here, and I just want to thank Avask for being a sponsor of this event. And Avask has been a sponsor for a lot of the events. And so that would include the Global Empire Summit going back 3 years ago. Everything last year, everything so far this year. I think everything in 2021. So let's just say that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 summits prior to this one. So 10 summits prior to this one, Avask has been a sponsor of. Do you think it'd be fun to give away recordings of all 10 of those summits?
Definitely.
Many of them have been a speaker on.
Yeah, definitely. My face will be on a few of those.
All right, so let's do this. If you would like to win the 10, and sometimes people are like, but I didn't win the giveaway the last time. Well, this is your chance. So I'm going to give away the 10 summits, the recordings of the last 10 summits previous to this one that Avask was a sponsor of. All you got to do is type in Avask, which there's an A right there. So it starts with A-V-A-S-K, A-V and ask. So think about audio visual and asking a question, Avask. So just type in Avask into the chat. And I've never asked this question. Where did the term Avask come from?
Good point. So yeah, the founders created the name Avask. It's a combination of different things to kind of create that name. So yeah, it's we've been going for just over 10 years now, so coming up to 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so very, very focused on the e-commerce industry. Been working with Amazon since 2013, so very long time. Helped thousands of people go into different markets, different regulations. Lots of success that we've seen. So yeah, hoping that we can see some more success and that people that are listening do take something from this, and hopefully is giving them some good insight for what they want to do and what they want to plan moving forward.
Exactly. And I've been a client now for 5 years at least of Avask. And so it's not just Avask as a sponsor because they're a sponsor. They're a sponsor because I've known them much longer than they've been a sponsor of these events. And so I think it's important that, we're putting credible companies into our sponsorship programs for these events. And so again, I thank you to Avask, you and the team, for your support. And I know we do have some people who are interested in expanding internationally, and they can set up a meeting and just talk to somebody.
Yeah, definitely. So they can reach out, on avaskgroup.com. So that, there's many forms of reaching out to us. If you want to speak to me, feel free to, make a request to speak to me. We got teams in different areas, facilitating different kind of time zones as well, and helping with kind of many markets expanding internationally. So yeah, we'd be more than happy to support any businesses, and free consultation is something that we can offer. So there's no strings attached. If you just want to have a conversation, talk about your business, talking about how your business can expand, that you can have that conversation with one of our team, myself, one of the team, for free, and you can then make an informed decision of whether it's going to be right or wrong for you.
Yeah, definitely. And if anything, at least just have the conversation, and maybe you decide it's the right time, and maybe you decide, hey, maybe this is on my roadmap for next year, whatever the case is. But the first step is having the conversation.
Yeah.
All right. So now I know there's a lot of people who are like, but I want to know, did I win? So let's see. You got to put your name into the chat, or just put Avask into the chat and we'll know it's your name. Unless you're on Facebook, then it's a good idea to put your name next to Avask. But we've got Carrie. We've got Pro SMF. We've got Rosina VA. We've got Alec Myers. We've got Olga from Miami. We've got Faisal. Ramon. We've got The Rock. The Rock himself. We do smell what The Rock is cooking. We've got PP Periash, who is very excited about it. So I wanted to make sure to give it to us in both capitalized and not capitalized. So we are coming out of time here. So we're going to say, go ahead. This is it. So if you've not yet put your name in the chat, you can see who all is who's eligible, and it has to be live. So if you're watching the replay, we appreciate you watching all the way through here to the end. But in order to be eligible, you must be here live. So on that note, I'm going to go going once, going twice, and spin. I have no control. This is random generator. Wheel of names. It's much more exciting than using an actual random number generator. So this is Alec. Yes. So PP did actually put in another request. But only one counts. Only one counts. Love the enthusiasm. But yeah, so Alec, just email kevin@maximizingecommerce.com. Let me know that you were the winner, and I will add you to this. I think you won something else the other day. So congratulations for winning again. So everyone else is a winner because you could potentially expand internationally, and you could have the folks at Avask Accounting help you, just like they have helped me for the last several years. Just heading on over to avaskgroup.com, and hope this was helpful for everyone. And Alec, it's our pleasure. So I'm glad that you enjoyed the win. Yes, you're on a roll. So congratulations. And everyone else, thank you for being part of the summit. All right. Take care.
Thank you very much, guys.